Today officially kicked off the Denver Broncos 3-day veteran mandatory minicamp. It runs from today, June 13th through June 15th. Now, just as the name suggests, attendance for this is mandatory for all players, rookie and veteran. Now, some players can get an exception from attendance due to prior obligations or other various matters, but for the most part, you're expected to be there. There's no choosing not to attend unless, of course, you want to subject yourself to fines. So overall, I wanted to go through some of the news and notes from today's practice. Now, unlike the last several years where Broncos beat reporters could basically give you play-by-play updates on these minicamp practices on Twitter, this year, with Sean Payton's new media policy, it can only be discussed after practice and after the reporters have met with Broncos media and essentially get what they're going to say approved from Sean Payton. Despite this, though, according to reports that did get out on Twitter, players that looked good in practice today include Russell Wilson, who was crisp and clean with his throws. He was on time, he was accurate, and overall he apparently looked good. Albert Okwuegbunam also had a couple of really big plays for us today apparently, so that's really good to see. Albert Okwuegbunam was a guy who was pretty much in the doghouse for the entirety of last year under Nathaniel Hackett and company, but once Hackett was gone and Jerry Rossberg took over as interim head coach for the final 2 games, and Justin Outen took over as offensive play caller, we finally saw Albert O getting integrated more and more. He's got really good speed, size, and athleticism, which Sean Payton alluded to today in his presser, and he said that Okwuegbunam has the potential to be a really big weapon for the Denver Broncos this year, and that's really exciting to see that we have a coaching staff that's actually going to give Alberto a fair shake, because it really felt like he never got that last year. The team was always trying to get guys such as Eric Tomlinson, Eric Saubert, and Andrew Beck on the field, and Greg Dulcich as well, rightfully so. But it really felt like Albert Okwuegbunam was grossly underused last season when he really could have made a really big impact for us. Granted, his biggest drawback is probably his blocking. He is horrible as a blocker, quite frankly. So I feel like Sean Payton's going to realize that and not put him in heavy tight end sets where he's going to be asked to block. He's essentially going to be used as a bigger wide receiver, and in my opinion, that's the role that fits Albert Okwuegbunam the best. Payton also talked about Frank Clark. Now, at the time of the press conference, Frank Clark had not signed his deal yet. That changed about 2 hours later, and he did officially ink his deal with the Denver Broncos. Payton had said that the team was always on the same page with Frank Clark, and they were just working out some little bit of formalities with his contract language and whatnot. But overall, there were no issues with Frank Clark getting signed, and he is officially a member of the Denver Broncos. In a corresponding move, the team announced that they have waived wide receiver Nick Williams. Now, Frank Clark's a guy who does bring some positional versatility. He can line up as an interior defensive lineman, but he's a little small, in my opinion, to do that on a consistent basis. So he's going to be used predominantly as an outside linebacker, edge rusher in this defense, according to Sean Payton. Hopefully Vance Joseph will be able to find creative ways to use him, and I do feel like the edge rush position is one position that Vance Joseph has always been able to get the most out of, be it guys such as Von Miller, Bradley Chubb for the 1 year that they worked together, J.J. Watt, you think about guys also like Chandler Jones. I mean, Vance Joseph, for all the knocks that you can give him as a defensive coordinator, he has been able to get the most out of his edge rushers, and here's hoping he'll be able to do the same with Frank Clark. Payton said that yes, the decision to sign Frank Clark was partially predicated on the fact that Baron Browning suffered a torn meniscus and had to have surgery, and Payton also said that Browning will likely start the season on PUP, so he may miss some time in the regular season, which absolutely sucks. But he also said that Frank Clark is a pressure player who is going to be able to find a way to get on the field even when Baron Browning gets healthy, because he's a really good player. Frank Clark is a guy that, at least throughout the regular season, may not be the biggest sack generator on the box score stats, but he does generate a lot of pressures and will make life easier for guys such as Baron Browning and Randy Gregory, as well as Zach Allen and DJ Jones and Mike Purcell on the interior. I also feel like they're going to find ways to set up stunts and pass rush games for him. That's essentially where 2 defensive linemen cross paths with each other, and one sets up the block with 2 guys so the other one can loop back inside. Von Miller and Derek Wolfe combined for a lot of sacks doing this, and I feel like Vance Joseph is going to do that with the interior defenders and the edge rushers that I listed. Something else that was also interesting, I thought, was that Pat Surtain was working at a super peculiar position today. He was working on punt return, both as a gunner and as an actual punt returner. Sean Payton talked about this and said that although he's not going to be our main option at that position, he is a guy that, should we need to insert our second or our third option either as a gunner or as a punt returner, PS2 can do that. He brings the speed, he brings the physicality, and he's got really good hands for a DB. So although Pat Surtain, I don't think he's going to be our primary returner, that's just another way that we can use him and get more versatility out of him. And Sean Payton talked about that's what makes a guy like Pat Surtain such a special player. He was obviously on special teams in high school. Pretty much at Alabama, he stayed off of special teams. That was relegated to some of the younger players on the team, a lot of the freshman players and whatnot. But Pat Surtain's a guy that once again has displayed that level of versatility and has shown that he is perfectly capable of making plays on special teams. I really like his chances as a gunner, honestly. I really feel like he'd be able to use some of that physicality to win at the line, and he'd be able to get downfield and make some really good plays tackling guys downfield, because Payton said he already does that. He's already a tackling machine. So why not give him another chance to do that? Obviously, I don't think it's going to be in any more than, say, an emergency situation, but it would be really cool to see Pat Surtain fly downfield and make a big tackle on special teams, or maybe even return a punt to the house. Now, another thing that Payton talked about today was a problem that plagued the Broncos last year, and that was penalties. The Broncos were the most penalized team in the entire NFL last year, and it wasn't even close. Payton said that that is absolutely unacceptable, and unfortunately, some of that is already starting to spill over into practices today. Payton said that there were way too many flags in today's minicamp practice, and that is absolutely inexcusable. He said that he really liked having the referees out there today so they could be able to catch the various mistakes that players were making, and so therefore the team can go in and clean those mistakes up in June, as opposed to having to make adjustments on the fly and try to clean up those mistakes in season like it felt like the Broncos were doing last year. And it was a lot of stupid penalties too, like pre-snap penalties, false starts, illegal shifts, illegal motions, just stupid, inexcusable penalties that should not fly at the NFL level, man. As an offensive lineman, your job is to be familiar with the quarterback's cadence and voice inflection, so that way you will not jump and trigger a false start penalty, and the Broncos were absolutely terrible at that last year. Payton said that those kind of penalties absolutely will not fly here in Denver, and that this season you absolutely will see a decrease in penalties. He promised that. Payton's a guy who's very detail-oriented, and penalties are a product of lack of care to detail, and that's something that will not fly under Sean Payton. So I'm really hoping that this year Sean Payton will be able to clean up the stupid pre-snap penalties, especially because those are the ones that really shot us in the foot. Way too often we found ourselves in 1st and 15, 2nd and 15, 1st and 20, and you're not going to recover from those long down situations, and that's one of the reasons why the Broncos offense failed last year, because way too often we found ourselves in long down situations, which we absolutely cannot do, and we can't have those self-inflicted ones in terms of penalties. So Sean Payton says that that is something he will personally see to getting cleaned up this season here in Denver, and I'm really excited to see that. Payton also talked about Courtland Sutton and how he's been studying film of Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas, especially in the 2019 season where he set the NFL single season record for receptions, to see how he gets open and various nuances in his route running. Payton said that Courtland Sutton will hold the same role as Michael Thomas, that ex-receiver. So at the end of the day, Courtland Sutton's going to really have to continue to brush up on what Michael Thomas did in this offense that made him successful, and hopefully that will ultimately translate into Courtland Sutton's game, because when you look at them, they really are similar players in terms of skill set. They can do a lot of the same stuff. So I really do like what Courtland Sutton's chances are to be the #1 receiver in this offense, despite the connection that Russell Wilson has with guys such as Tim Patrick and Jerry Jeudy. All right, guys, so that's pretty much all I got for you for day 1 1 of Denver Broncos Mandatory Veteran Minicamp. Be sure to keep it right here tomorrow for continuing coverage and more news and notes as we get them throughout this minicamp period. And after that, we will not be seeing the team back at the training center again until training camp in July. So we really need to get our football fix in now, because it's going to be about a 5-week dead period, which is absolutely going to suck. But here's hoping that we can get some good work in as a team during this 3-day period and get better and better at what we're trying to do and the culture that we are trying to build. So I'm curious, Broncos country, how do you feel about the team heading into this veteran minicamp period, and what are you hoping that we can accomplish throughout these 3 days? Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video, as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. As I always say, those are 2 free and easy ways to share your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out to fellow members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, this has been another episode of Denver Broncos Syndicate. I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.